She sold herself to survive. What happened in the mountain cabin shocked everyone. The snow began falling before dawn, the kind that did not ask permission. It came sideways, sharp as needles, stinging Miriam's cheeks and collecting in the folds of her thin shawl. Winter in the northern mountains was not a season, it was a verdict. Each year it judged who would endure and who would vanish quietly beneath white silence. Miriam had once known warmth. She had once known laughter that filled a room and the comfort of a shared fire. But those memories belonged to another life, a softer one that felt unreal now, like a dream that faded the moment she tried to hold it. Her husband, Yusuf, had been gone 2 winters. A landslide had swallowed the road where he worked as a porter, carrying supplies to high villages. The mountain took him without drama or witnesses, as it took so many others. It did not return what it claimed. After his death, sympathy lasted a season. Neighbors brought lentils and old blankets. They spoke gently and avoided her eyes. By the second winter, sympathy had frozen over. Everyone was struggling, no one could carry another's burden forever. Miriam sold what she could, first the jewelry Yusuf had given her on their wedding day, then the copper pots, then the small radio that brought voices from faraway places. When there was nothing left to sell, hunger remained. The mountain villages had their rules, spoken and unspoken. A widow alone was tolerated, pitted even, but not supported. Work was scarce, and a woman without a man was seen as fragile, inconvenient. The few jobs she found, cleaning, mending, carrying water, paid barely enough to keep her alive, let alone warm. When the snow came early that year, the work vanished altogether. On the night she made her choice, the wind howled like a wounded animal. Miriam sat alone in her room, staring at the cold hearth. Her breath fogged the air. She pressed her hands together, trying to remember the feeling of heat. She thought of Yusuf's voice, calm and steady. "Survive," he would have said. He had always been practical. "Do what you must." By morning, she wrapped herself in her shawl and walked toward the lower road where travelers sometimes passed. She did not look back. They called him the Mountain Man. No one remembered his real name anymore. Some said it was Elias, others swore it was Karim. He lived alone, far above the villages, in a cabin built from old pine logs and stubbornness. The cabin clung to the mountainside like it had grown there, smoke curling from its chimney only when the weather allowed. People spoke of him in half-sentences. He was quiet. He kept to himself. He hunted and trapped and rarely came down except to trade furs or buy salt. Children were warned not to wander near his land. Not because he was cruel, but because he was unknown. Unknown was dangerous enough. Miriam had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But when she reached the road and found no travelers, only the endless white and the wind, desperation pushed fear aside. She walked until her legs shook and her thoughts grew thin. It was nearly dusk when she saw the smoke. The cabin stood back from the path, partially hidden by snow-laden trees. Miriam hesitated. Her plan, if it could be called that, had been simple. She would offer what little she had left to whoever would keep her alive for the winter. Money was useless here. Survival was currency. She had prepared herself for rejection. For rough words. For worse. She had not prepared herself for the silence of the mountains, or the way the cabin seemed to watch her as she approached. She knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened just enough for a man's face to appear, framed by a thick beard dusted with gray. His eyes were dark, assessing, but not unkind. "Yes," he said. His voice was deep, amused. Miriam swallowed. I need shelter," she said. Her voice shook despite her efforts. "I can work." "I can," she stopped herself, then forced the words out. "I can pay." The man studied her, his gaze dropping briefly to her thin frame, the worn shawl, the frost in her hair. He opened the door wider. "Come in," he said simply. The cabin was warmer than Miriam expected. A fire burned steadily in the hearth, casting orange light across the room. The air smelled of pine resin and smoke and something earthy, drying herbs, perhaps. The man closed the door behind her and set a log on the fire. "Sit," he said, nodding to a rough wooden chair. She obeyed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "My name is," he paused, then shook his head slightly. "People call me the Mountain Man." Miriam managed a small nod. "I'm Miriam." He poured hot water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Drink." She took it with trembling fingers. The heat seeped into her, slow and painful, like life returning to a frozen limb. Silence stretched between them. The Mountain Man leaned against the table, arms crossed, waiting. "I won't stay long," Miriam said quickly. "Just until the storms pass. I'll earn my keep." He raised an eyebrow. "How?" "I can clean. Cook. Mend. Anything." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Anne. If that's not enough, I can offer more." The words tasted like ash. She forced herself to hold his gaze, bracing for what she believed would come next. The Mountain Man's expression changed, not to hunger, as she had feared, but to something like surprise. Then, slowly, his face hardened. "No," he said. The word fell heavy between them. "No." Miriam echoed, confusion flaring. Rejection she had expected. This, she had not. "I don't buy people," he said flatly. "You can stay for the night. The storm's bad. After that, we'll see." Her chest tightened. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's a roof. And a fire." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Exhaustion crashed over her, leaving no strength for pride. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Miriam slept on a pallet near the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket the Mountain Man wordlessly placed over her. She dreamed of Yusuf, standing at the edge of a forest, watching her with an expression she could not read. When she woke, sunlight filtered weakly through the small window. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned, heavy and sharp. The Mountain Man was already awake, sharpening a knife by the door. "I'll leave today," Miriam said, sitting up. He glanced at her. "The storm hasn't passed." She looked outside. Snow still fell, though less violently. "I'll manage." He set the knife down. "You won't." She stiffened. "I told you, I don't want." "I know," he interrupted. "You want to earn your keep." "Yes." "Good. Then we'll do it that way." He handed her a bowl of thick stew. "Eat. Then you can help." Days turned into a rhythm Miriam had forgotten existed. She swept, cooked, learned how to dry meat and store roots so they would last through winter. The Mountain Man showed her how to split wood properly, how to set snares, how to listen to the mountain's moods. He spoke little, but when he did, his words mattered. He never touched her without permission, never looked at her like she was something to be taken. Slowly, the constant knot of fear in her chest loosened. At night, they sat by the fire, each lost in their own thoughts. Sometimes he would tell her stories of the mountain. Of storms that reshaped valleys, of animals that seemed almost human in their cleverness. She told him about Yusuf, about the life she had lost. One evening, as the wind rattled the cabin walls, Miriam asked the question that had been burning in her for days. "Why do you live alone?" she said softly. He stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "Because it's quieter." "That's not the real reason." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're observant." She waited. I had a family once, he said finally. A wife. A son. An illness came through the valley one winter. By the time help arrived, it was too late. I'm sorry, Miriam whispered. So am I. He glanced at her. That's why I don't trade in bodies or debts. I know how thin the line is between dignity and survival. Her throat tightened. For the first time since Yusuf's death, she felt truly seen. The villagers noticed when Miriam didn't return. Whispers began. Some said she had run away. Others said worse. When spring crept closer and Miriam finally descended the mountain to trade goods, the looks she received were sharp and curious. She lives with the mountain man, someone muttered. The story grew legs. By the time it reached the lower villages, it had become something ugly. A widow who sold herself. A hermit who took advantage. People love simple stories, especially when they confirm their fears. Miriam heard the rumors and felt the old shame stir, threatening to swallow her hard-won peace. When she told the mountain man, he listened without interruption. Then he shrugged. Let them talk. It matters, she said. To me. He studied her, then nodded slowly. Then we'll show them. The chance came sooner than expected. Late one afternoon, a blizzard swept down the mountain without warning. Visibility dropped to nothing. That night, desperate knocking echoed against the cabin door. A group of villagers stood outside, half frozen, having lost their way on the pass. Among them were men who had once turned Miriam away. The mountain man didn't hesitate. He ushered them inside, fed them, wrapped them in blankets. Miriam worked beside him, steady and calm, her movements practiced. When dawn came and the storm passed, the villagers looked at the cabin, and at Miriam, with new eyes. She saved us, one of them said quietly. Both of you did. Word spread, this time different. Slower. Truer. When spring finally broke the mountain's grip, Miriam stood outside the cabin, breathing in air that smelled of thawing earth. I could go back, she said. To the village. The mountain man nodded. You could. And you? I'll still be here. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. I don't want to sell myself to survive anymore. You never did, he said. She looked at the cabin, at the mountains that had taken so much and given something unexpected in return. May I stay? He met her gaze, something warm and unspoken passing between them. If you want to. Miriam stepped back inside, closing the door against the last of winter's ghosts. And the mountain, silent as ever, kept their secret, not of shame, but of survival, dignity, and a kindness that had shocked everyone who thought they knew the story already.